My name is Linda Mercer. I was 56 years old when my family called me the useless daughter at my father's funeral, right in front of the same people who had watched me drive him to dialysis 3 times a week for 2 years, pay his electric bill when his hands shook too badly to write a check, refill his prescriptions at the pharmacy on Clement Street where they knew me by name, and sit beside his hospital bed at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night while my brother Ryan was in Phoenix at a conference he said he could not cancel. My mother said I was too emotional to handle grown-up matters. Ryan told the funeral director out loud where people could hear that he was the one managing Dad's estate. My sister-in-law Denise smiled when I was moved out of the front pew because, according to her, Linda gets overwhelmed. What none of them knew was that my father had left one sealed envelope with his estate attorney. Inside that envelope was a signed, notarized, properly filed will that they were absolutely certain did not matter. 2 days later, in a lawyer's conference room with my mother, my brother, my sister-in-law, the attorney, and a probate clerk all seated around the same table, that will did not just name me. It put me in charge of everything. Before I tell you how we got to that room, you need to understand what my father's house meant, because the house is where this story lives. Harold Mercer was not a wealthy man by the standard anyone would brag about. He ran a hardware store on the same block for 40 years, sold it when his knees gave out, and put the money into a savings account he never touched unless something broke. The house on Birchwood Drive was paid off. 3 bedrooms, a covered porch, a garage where every drawer was labeled in his blocky handwriting: nails, sandpaper, metric, standard. He planted a maple tree in the front yard, the spring I was born, and by the time I was 56, that tree was taller than the house. The kitchen table still had the ring mark from the coffee can he used as a coaster for 30 years. That was the table where I sorted his medications into the weekly pill case every Sunday night. That was the table where I spread out his insurance forms and learned, by necessity, what prior authorization meant and why it mattered, and how to argue with a nurse administrator on the phone without raising my voice. I lived 10 minutes away in a modest duplex. I drove over 4 or 5 times a week, more toward the end. I kept a paper calendar, the kind with big squares, and I filled it with his appointments in blue pen. Dialysis, Monday, and Wednesday and Friday. Cardiology, first Tuesday of the month. Pharmacy pickup every other Thursday. Lab draw whenever they called. I am a school secretary. I have kept other people's schedules my entire working life. Keeping my father's felt like the most natural thing I had ever done. The house, the maple tree, the labeled drawers, the table, those were the last physical proof that my father had seen me clearly, even when no one else did. Losing control of the estate meant losing all of that. Not to memory, to Ryan's real estate folder, and that is what was actually at stake. Not drama, not inheritance money, the last place on earth where what I did for 24 months of my life was written into the walls. Here is the thing about being the daughter who gets called useless. Nobody announces it with that word, not at first. It builds. Small decisions made without you, compliments given to everyone else at the table. A pattern of substitution. Somebody else handles this. Somebody else knows better. Somebody else should speak. By the time you are old enough to notice, it has already become the family truth. I struggled in school. Reading came slowly for me. I hated standing up in front of a classroom. When I was 17, I froze in the middle of a family argument about whether we should take a summer vacation, and I could not find my words and my mother looked at me with something between pity and impatience and moved the conversation forward without me. Ryan was already the smart one by then. He understood money and systems and how to walk into a room like he belonged there. He corrected my sentences before I finished them, not meanly, always with a little half smile, like he was doing me a favor. Carol, my mother, handed me chores. She handed Ryan decisions. Denise came into the family when Ryan was 32, and she absorbed the family hierarchy the way a new employee absorbs an office culture. She learned the joke fast. Do not ask Linda unless you need cupcakes or sympathy. She repeated it at dinners. She softened it with a laugh that made it sound affectionate. It was not affectionate. My father rarely argued with any of it out loud. Harold Mercer was not a man who made speeches. But I noticed things. He noticed things. He noticed that when his hands started shaking during the second year of dialysis, I was the one who called the neurologist's office. He noticed that when the insurance company denied the medication his cardiologist prescribed, I was the one who filed the appeal and won it. He noticed that I learned the difference between a Medicare supplement and a Medicare Advantage plan because it mattered for his coverage, and I sat at his kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and worked through it until I understood. He noticed who argued with the pharmacy when the generic substitution made him nauseated. He noticed who was there on the bad nights and who was in Phoenix. He did not say any of this to me directly. He was not that kind of man. But 6 months before he died, he made an appointment with Martin Hale, his estate attorney, and he signed a new will. I did not know that yet on the morning of the funeral. The first wrong detail appeared before the service even started. The funeral home had printed programs, cream paper, Harold Mercer's name at the top, a photograph from his 65th birthday when his hair was still more brown than gray. I picked up a program from the table near the door and opened it. Ryan was listed as family representative with a short paragraph about his role in coordinating arrangements. His name appeared twice. My name appeared near the bottom, in the section that read, "Also survived by, tucked between 3 cousins who had not been to Dad's house in years." I stood there with the program in my hand and read it twice to make sure I was understanding it correctly. When I found the funeral director near the side hallway and asked him about it, he looked at his shoes first. Then he said Carol had approved the final wording. I pressed my thumbnail into my palm once, hard, and walked back into the foyer. Then Denise appeared at my elbow. The front pew was reserved, she said, for decision-making family. She gestured toward the 3rd row, like she was showing me to a restaurant table, pleasant and efficient. Ryan came up behind her and patted the back of the seat she had indicated, the way you might show a child where to sit on a school bus. He said, "We have got it covered, Linda. Just be present." I sat where they put me, but before I did, I scanned the room. Near the guest book table, a man I did not recognize was standing with a leather folder tucked under one arm. He was speaking quietly with Ryan's business associate, nodding, and I could see the tab on the folder from where I stood. Mercer Property. He was not a family friend. He was not from the neighborhood. He was dressed in the particular way of someone who does not attend funerals, but attends the business that funerals make possible. The service was beautiful, if that word applies. People spoke about my father warmly. Someone mentioned the hardware store. Someone mentioned his patients. Nobody mentioned the dialysis. Nobody mentioned the pharmacy appeals. I sat in the 3rd row with the program in my lap and kept my hands still. After the burial, the family gathered in the church basement the way families do. casseroles and coffee and folding chairs arranged in a way that creates the impression of order. Ryan made a short speech from the center of the room, thanking everyone for their patience as the family worked through Harold's affairs. Carol stood beside him nodding. Denise circulated with a box of tissues she was not using. "We will get everything sorted quickly," Ryan said. Dad kept things simple. "We just need to respect that." A few people made sounds of agreement. Two of the aunts squeezed Carol's hands. Somebody refilled the coffee. Then Ryan came and sat beside me at the end of a folding table near the wall, and he placed a piece of paper in front of me. He called it a family acknowledgement. He said it was just to keep probate uncomplicated. He said Dad would have wanted the family to handle things privately and quickly without a lot of back and forth with courts. He was using his reasonable voice, the one he used when he corrected my sentences, careful and patient and designed to make disagreement feel like a failure of understanding. "It is not a complicated document," he said. "It just says, you support me acting as the family's estate representative while we get the house." Situation settled. Denise drifted close enough to hear. She said, quietly, but not quietly enough for two nearby aunts to miss it, "This is why Dad never put Linda in charge of anything. She makes everything harder than it has to be." I looked at the paper. It was not a family acknowledgement. It was a waiver. "I am a school secretary. I have processed district paperwork for 22 years. I know what a waiver looks like." This document would grant Ryan authority to act as estate representative and, specifically, authorized him to pursue the immediate listing and sale of the family property without requiring the consent of other family members. They were trying to get my signature before the will was read. I picked up the paper, folded it once along the center crease, and put it in my purse. Ryan's expression flickered for just a second. Then he smiled. "You should look it over at home," he said. "No pressure. Just do not wait too long." I drove home with my hands tight on the steering wheel and the folded paper in my purse, and the name of a real estate agent I did not know somewhere in the back of my mind. That evening, I went to my father's house. I still had a key. Carol was staying with Ryan and Denise for the week, so the house was empty. I stood in the kitchen for a moment. Then I went to the cabinet above the refrigerator where Dad kept his recipe tin, the red one with the rooster on the lid that had never contained a single recipe in living memory. He used it for things he did not want to forget. Takeout menus, an old fishing license, a birthday card from 20 years ago. I opened the lid. Inside was a business card, cream-colored with Martin Hale's name and number printed in plain black type, and underneath it, held in place by a blue rubber band, was a folded note in my father's handwriting. His letters were always blocky and deliberate, the handwriting of a man who learned to print carefully and never switched to cursive. The note said, "Linda, do not sign anything before Hale reads the will." He knew. He had known they would do this. He had known they would move fast, use the window of grief, put paper in front of me before anyone had read anything official. He had known I needed to be told specifically, in writing, because he understood his family. I stood at his kitchen table and read the note 3 times. Then I put it back under the rubber band and carried the tin home with me. The next morning, I was at Martin Hale's office at 9 o'clock. Hale was a small, deliberate man who kept his desk clear and his files organized in a way that reminded me of my own office. He had known my father for 11 years. He did not seem surprised to see me. He asked me to sit, poured water from a carafe on the credenza, and placed a manila envelope on the desk between us. "Your father wanted you to see this before the family meeting," he said. He was specific about the timing. The certified copy of the will was 8 pages. Hale walked me through each section at a pace I could follow. He did not rush. He did not talk down to me. He pointed to the executor clause first. Harold Raymond Mercer named Linda Jean Mercer as sole executor of his estate, full authority over estate decisions, control of the family property on Birchwood Drive. No authorized sale without the executor's written consent. Ryan's share listed as conditional, contingent on the settlement of estate debts, verified caregiving costs, and administrative fees determined by the executor. I want you to remember the word conditional because it came back later. Hale then showed me the witness signatures. 2 neighbors who had come to Dad's house on a Tuesday in October, 6 months before the end. He showed me the notary stamp, dated and sealed. He showed me the attached letter, 1 page, signed by my father, written in the same blocky handwriting as the recipe tin note, explaining in plain language why he had updated the will. He had discovered, during the previous year, that a checkbook he kept in the desk drawer had been accessed without his knowledge. He had found a property tax payment that was 3 months late, not because the money was not there, but because the payment had not been made. He did not name Ryan directly in the letter. He did not have to. Hale also told me something he said I should know before the family meeting. Ryan had called the office twice in the 2 weeks before Dad's death. He had asked, both times, whether an earlier version of the will, one filed 5 years prior, could be submitted to probate instead of any subsequent documents. The office had told him they were not in a position to advise him on that, and that all filed documents would be considered in the order of their execution. Ryan had called a second time to ask whether the family could contest a will if they felt the testator had not been of sound mind. Hale confirmed that my father had been examined by his physician 4 months before signing the updated will and had a clean cognitive evaluation on file. He said, "Your father was very thorough." I made 3 copies of the waiver Ryan had given me at the church. I put the original in a plastic sleeve and wrote the date, time, and location on a sticky note and clipped it to the front. I wrote church basement, received before will was read, in my small, even handwriting. I placed it in the folder Hale gave me, along with the certified will copy. Then I went home, and I sat on my couch for a long time, doing nothing. I wanted to send a message to the family group chat. I had the whole thing drafted in my head, the funeral program with my name at the bottom, the waiver they had slid in front of me while casseroles were still warm, the real estate agent with his leather folder at my father's funeral. All of it laid out in plain language with no room for misinterpretation. I typed the first line. "You tried to take the house before Dad was even in the ground." Then I deleted it. Anger would give Ryan a screenshot to reframe. Proof would give me the chair at the head of the table. I closed the app. I pressed my thumbnail into my palm, once. Then I called Hale and asked him to schedule the formal inheritance meeting. The meeting was set for the 2nd day after the funeral. Hale sent a formal notice to Ryan, Carol, and Denise. His assistant called each of them. The notice used language that was precise but unrevealing. It said all immediate family members were required to attend the reading of Harold Mercer's final will before any estate decisions could be discussed. It did not tell them what was in it. It did not have to. I brought 3 things to the meeting: the executor binder Hale had prepared, the unsigned waiver in its plastic sleeve, and the small notebook where I had recorded, month by month for the last 24 months, every bill I had paid from my own account on my father's behalf. pharmacy, insurance appeals, transportation, medical copays, the plumber for the pipe under the kitchen sink, the grocery runs when he was too tired. I had not tracked it with any plan in mind. I tracked it because I track things. That is what I do. Hale had told me I probably would not need the notebook. The will would speak first. But I brought it anyway because my father's note said, "Do not sign anything," and that was good enough for me. I am going to tell you exactly what that room looked like, because I have thought about it many times since. Martin Hale's conference room had a long table, dark wood, with 6 chairs on each side. There was a window at the far end that looked out onto a parking lot, and a row of Bradford pear. Trees that were just starting to bloom, a carafe of water on a side table, a legal pad at each seat, unused. Hale sat at the center on one side with his assistant to his right and the probate clerk to his left. A quiet woman named Patricia, who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and had a court stamp in front of her. Carol arrived first. She sat closest to the door, her hands folded, wearing black gloves she had not removed. Her expression was the particular expression she had worn at every difficult family event as long as I could remember, stoic and slightly injured. The look of a woman who has already decided she is the wronged party in any situation. Ryan came in 2 minutes later with Denise at his shoulder. He sat at the center of the opposite side of the table, phone face down, jacket on. He had a leather folder in front of him, not the real estate one, a different one, thinner, and he was already organizing himself, flipping through papers, the posture of someone who expects to be running the meeting. Denise sat beside him with a pen in her hand and her notepad open, as if there were something she expected to be writing down. They each looked at me when I walked in. Ryan's eyes went to my folder first, then my face, then back to the table. Denise's expression arranged itself into something that was trying to be sympathetic. Carol did not look up. I chose the chair at the far end of the table, the one nobody had offered me, the one across from Hale. The head seat on my side. Nobody said anything about it. Hale welcomed everyone formally, confirmed the names present, and explained that Patricia was there in her capacity as probate clerk to witness the official reading. He said there would be time for questions after the document was read in full, and he asked everyone to hold those questions until the reading was complete. Ryan shifted in his chair. "We do not need a lot of formality, Martin. This is a family matter." Hale looked at him with the polite blankness of a man who has sat across from a lot of people, who wanted to make official things informal. He said, "I understand. We will get through this as efficiently as possible." Then he placed the certified copy of Dad's will on the table and turned it so the first page faced the room. Carol reached for it. "Only the executor may authorize copies following filing," Hale said. And he kept his hand near the edge of the document. Carol drew her hand back. Patricia read the executor clause aloud in the measured voice of someone who reads legal language for a living. She read my name. She read the full authority clause. She read the property protection clause, the one that said, "The family home on Birchwood Drive could not be listed, sold, transferred, or encumbered without the written consent of the executor." Denise's pen stopped moving against the paper. Ryan's thumb pressed hard against the corner of his phone on the table, not picking it up, just pressing. A chair leg made a short, scraping sound against the floor as Ryan shifted his weight back. The Bradford pear trees outside the window moved once in the wind and then went still. The carafe of water on the side table caught the light. Nobody reached for it. Patricia continued reading. When she reached the section on Ryan's conditional share, she read it clearly, contingent on the settlement of all estate debts, the reimbursement of verified caregiving costs as determined by the executor, and the completion of administrative review. Ryan said, "Conditional on what, exactly?" Hale said, "We will get to questions in a moment." He then placed a second document on the table beside the will, not under it, beside it, parallel, so everyone at the table could see both at once. It was the waiver. The one Ryan had given me in the church basement. The one with my name typed at the signature line and the authorization language and the property sale approval built into the middle paragraph where most people would not read carefully. Hale said, "Can someone explain why Linda was asked to sign this document before this meeting took place, and before the final will had been read to any family member?" The Bradford pear trees moved again. Carol looked at Ryan, not at me, not at Hale, at Ryan. That was the first crack. Ryan said it was just a formality. He said it was standard, that families often consolidate authority during estate proceedings to keep things simple. He said he had not meant anything by it, that he had been trying to protect everyone. Hale said, "This document would have granted you authority to list the family property immediately. Linda's signature would have created a legal basis for bypassing the executor appointment in this will." Ryan said, "We did not know about the will." Hale said, "You called this office twice, asking whether an earlier will could be submitted to probate." The pen in Denise's hand set itself down on the legal pad. One of the aunts who had come with Carol leaned slightly forward from the seat nearest the wall. She was Carol's older sister. She had known my father for 50 years. She said, quietly, to no one in particular, "Ryan, why were you trying to sell Harold's house before anyone knew what he wanted?" Ryan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "That is not, it was not." He looked at Denise. Denise was not looking at him. She was looking at the waiver on the table beside the will. The two documents sitting side by side, and something behind her eyes had gone still and careful. Carol said, "Ryan," just his name, not defending him, not angry. Asking. Ryan said the real estate inquiry had been exploratory. He said he had been trying to protect the family's financial interests. He said he had not done anything wrong. The more he explained, the more words he used, the more space he filled with explanation, and the worse it got, the way it always gets when someone explains themselves out of a position they cannot hold. Hale let him finish. Then he said, professionally and without drama, that the probate clerk would be noting the waiver document as part of the executor appointment filing. He said the estate account would be administratively locked until the court confirmed the executor appointment, which was expected within the standard window. He said the real estate contact Ryan had been in communication with would need to be formally notified that any sale discussion was suspended. He said all estate decisions would now flow through the executor. He looked at me when he said it. I did not look at Ryan. I looked at Patricia, who was stamping the filing copies with the quiet efficiency of someone doing her job. I listened to the stamp hit the paper, once, twice, 3 times. The aunt who had asked the question about the house was still looking at Ryan. Carol had moved her gaze to the window. Denise had picked up her pen and was holding it, but not writing anything. Ryan said he wanted to speak to Hale privately. Hale said that was fine, and that Linda, as executor, would need to be present for any estate-related conversation. Ryan said that was not necessary. Hale said it was. Ryan's folder sat closed in front of him. He did not open it again. I want to tell you, the moment I said the thing I had been building toward without knowing it, because it did not feel like a prepared line. It felt like the only accurate sentence left in the room. Ryan was in the middle of saying something about how nobody had intended to exclude me, how the family had always valued what I contributed, how this had all been a misunderstanding that got complicated, and I said, "You did not think I was useless. You were counting on me believing it." Not loud. Calm. The way you state a fact that everyone in the room already knows but has been politely avoiding. Ryan stopped talking. The aunt made a small sound that was not quite a word. Carol looked at me for the first time since we had all sat down, not with anger, but with something older and more uncomfortable than anger. Recognition, maybe? The kind that comes too late to be useful. Denise said nothing. Hale gathered the documents. Patricia filed the last stamp. The meeting ended the way real meetings end, not with a scene, but with people standing up slowly, collecting their things, calculating their next moves in silence. Ryan and Denise left first. Ryan did not say anything to me on the way out. Denise's shoulder passed within 2 feet of mine in the doorway, and she did not turn her head. The real estate folder he had carried in was still on the table. He had forgotten it, or decided it did not matter now. Either way, he left without it. Carol stopped in the doorway. She looked at me for a moment with the black gloves still on her hands. She said, "Your father loved you." I said, "I know." She left. The aunt squeezed my hand once before she followed. She did not say anything. She did not have to. I stayed while Hale's assistant organized the copies. Patricia confirmed the filing timeline. Hale walked me through the immediate next steps. Change the locks on Birchwood Drive. Collect any financial documents still in the house. Send written notification to any parties who had been in contact about the property. Open the estate account in my name as executor. He handed me the binder, a black 3-ring binder with the case number on the spine and the certified will copy behind the first tab. Then he handed me the house key. It was the spare key from his safe, the one my father had left with him. I held it in my hand for a moment. It was a plain brass key on a small ring, nothing special, but it had my father's fingerprints on it somewhere, and it opened the door to the kitchen table and the maple tree and the labeled drawers, and no one could touch any of it without my signature. That afternoon, I drove to Birchwood Drive. The house was quiet in the way houses get when someone has recently left them. Not empty exactly, but held in a kind of suspension. I let myself in through the side door, the one off the garage, the one I had used hundreds of times. I set the executor binder on the kitchen table. I put my keys next to it. I stood there for a moment. Then I called the locksmith. Hale had told me to change the side door lock and the back door, and I did not wait. The locksmith came within the hour, an older man who did not ask questions, just changed the locks efficiently, and handed me 2 new keys. I gave one to Hale's office for the estate file. I kept the other. I did not throw anyone's things out. I did not post anything on the family group chat. I did not call anyone to describe what had happened in that conference room. Ryan's name was removed from the estate account within the administrative window. The real estate contact was formally notified by Hale's office that the Mercer property was not available for listing and that any prior discussions were voided. The conditional clause in the will meant Ryan's share would not be calculated until all estate costs, including the caregiving reimbursements I documented in my notebook, were properly settled. The house would not be sold unless I decided to sell it, on my timeline for my reasons. Carol did not call me for 3 weeks. When she did, she talked about the weather and asked if I needed help with anything at the house. I said I had it handled. She said she knew. There was a long pause, and then she said my father had always been proud of me. I said thank you, and we hung up, and I stood in Dad's kitchen and opened the binder and checked the next administrative deadline in the filing calendar. Denise sent one message to the family group chat 2 weeks after the meeting. It said she and Ryan were focusing on their own family for a while and wished everyone well. No one responded. The chat had been quiet since the funeral. I sat at my father's kitchen table with the executor binder open in front of me and the blue rubber-banded note beside the certified copy of the will, and I looked at the ring mark from the old coffee can coaster that had been there for 30 years, and I thought about what my father had understood quietly, without making speeches. He had seen who showed up. He had made sure it mattered. I pressed my thumbnail into my palm once, in the way I always do, when I am trying to stay in my body instead of my head, and then I turned to the next page in the binder and got back to work. For the first time in my adult life, the family did not get to vote on whether Linda Mercer was capable. Dad had already signed the answer. The maple tree was visible through the kitchen window. Still there, taller than the house. If a family spends years calling one daughter useless, do they deserve mercy when her proof finally puts her in charge?